to another show of the Speaker's Gallery. Our guest today is Benjamin Ndolo, popularly known as Benji. Benjamin Ndolo is a political analyst. He is also a strategist. He has an organization that he runs, which is called Organization for National Empowerment, which is One. Also translated as One Kenya. Welcome to the show, Benji.
Mheshimiwa, Mr. Speaker, before you ask me any question, indeed no human is limited. I first watched you on the floor of Parliament a decade ago, 2009.
Yeah.
I was quite new in the country as a young man. And I liked your authoritative command of the issues and management of the House of Parliament. I believe it was the 9th Parliament.
Yeah, 10th Parliament.
The 10th Parliament.
Yes.
You did a fantastic job. And I was very privileged then, some years later, to meet you. I think it was at the Prestige where I stopped and said, Mr. Speaker, my name is so-and-so. I watched the debates. I like your command of the issues. I like what you're trying to do for the country then under President Kibaki. And today you are interviewing me. It is really my greatest honor. And I promise to give you the most candid of answers.
Thank you. Thank
Asante
you very
sana,
much.
sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
for the compliments.
Indeed, sir.
And welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Benjamin,
Yes, sir.
you are indeed one of the young Turks in this country
Yes, sir.
who does not mince words about issues.
I do not.
You speak your mind. Way back, about a year back,
Yes, sir.
we launched BBI.
Yes, sir.
Slightly less than a year. BBI was launched after the handshake.
Yeah.
The handshake was a year old sometimes back.
Yes.
At that time, the whole country hailed it
Yes.
because it was cessation of hostilities.
Yes.
After the elections were disputed. Many of us, including myself, believe that the elections were won by the ODM candidate those days, who was the NASA candidate also.
Correct.
But of course, they were rigged. And not only was the presidential candidate rigged out, but many of us were rigged out, including myself.
Okay.
And so basically, there was that
Yeah.
terrible tension in the country.
Correct.
Serious tension.
Correct.
A repeat of what was done in 2013.
Correct.
We were watching straight in the face the economic downturn and accompanying all other problems.
Yes.
Civil strife, ethnic violence.
Correct.
Basically, going the Somalia way.
Seceding. They talked about
Somalia way.
seceding.
Secession.
Secession.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when these two leaders came together out of the blues, without any preliminary discussions, without any efforts on the part of the international community or any other eminent personalities, we just watched them one morning at Harambee House, shaking hands there and coming together. The nation, there was a sigh of relief. We breathed relief. We were, We expected a fundamental shift from the way politics and public affairs were transacted in this country. And this handshake between a man who won 3 elections and was rigged out in 3 elections, and a man who was on his last term because of the term limits of the presidency, who wants to leave behind a legacy.
Correct.
We were going to get something phenomenal and fundamental and historical for this country. Now that the BBI report is out, what is there in it for Kenyans?
Good question, sir. I was very privileged to be one of the few Kenyans who knew about the handshake just before it happened. You know how?
Mm-hmm.
You know I'm a street shooter.
Yes.
I was informed by American intelligence
Uh-huh.
locally here
Yes.
because we coordinate and talk on a whole host of issues.
Yes.
And remember, this was one of the initiatives really of Ambassador Godek, the American ambassador. And I remember because there was a lot of query around the fact, Mr. Speaker, that unlike in previous years, there was not a breaking of some embassies supporting Raila, others supporting the president.
Yeah.
It was all unanimous
Yeah.
against your candidate, if I could call him that.
Yes, yes.
And so,
Because of the manner in which the process itself was done. The election was nullified at the first time.
and I think also, sir, because of other unspoken issues.
Yes, yes, I know. I know what you mean.
You've talked about Raila being, and he's talked about this himself, that he holds a record in the world of the leader most rigged out.
Yeah.
I'm just using his words
Yes,
against him.
yes, yes.
In that case, therefore, I would have gone to the root cause of this kind of antagonism against his candidature. And I think in there you find such things as the 1982 coup and what have you, because
We will revisit that.
we will revisit. I'm just giving that as a fundamental.
I want you to give the BBI, that is the handshake living up to the expectations of the Kenyans, or it is another flop again?
To me, the reason I'm giving this background and
Yes,
context
yes.
is the BBI had to be misguided ab initio. On the face of it, prima facie, if someone alleges that he actually got more votes than the president, and now he is reduced to working under the president in an undefined role, some of which his critics have even called a bodyguard, shadowing him around.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we discuss on Twitter and other platforms, Mr. Speaker, is can you imagine a situation where Hillary Clinton had to shadow around President Trump?
Yeah.
It's important to unify the country, yes.
Yes.
But I think that this culture
The
in
stature
this
and the
country,
dignity that was
Exactly.
bestowed on him by the Kenyan masses was not carried with its full gait and respect by Raila.
Absolutely. And,
Yes.
and the culture now we have in this country, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker, is the culture of sweeping things under the carpet.
Yeah.
The culture also of superficial painting of lipstick on a pig, so that you say everything is fine, we shook hands, we're going. BBI is talking about all the things that we already know that need to happen. For example, respect of public office under Chapter 6, provision of human rights and dignity under Chapter 4 of the Constitution, that there's right to food, right to water, right to health,
Shelter.
therefore good governance. You don't need BBI, Mr. Speaker, to tell you that. We know, for example, that ethnic antagonism and negative ethnicity is obviously unhealthy, is the opposite of democracy in this country. Yet, every day we are seeing, and even through BBI, the whipping up of emotions and ethnic groups into conclaves against another one. And finally, sir, if you have something like BBI, which is run by people whose credibility is also in question, the chairman, Haji, there are questions around, his election, his track record, his performance when he was Minister of Defense, and what have you.
Yeah.
When he was a provincial commissioner, and what have you. How is a guy like that now going to laud democracy in a third world country like Kenya?
Building bridges.
When he himself does not maybe understand democracy and embrace
Yes.
the same. You find that these are very primitive stopgap measures
Yes.
that don't address the real issues and don't go to the surgery that is needed. And finally, of course,
Yes.
by implementing BBI, you then, in public, antagonize the deputy president. So then you are building bridges and uniting the country,
And also demolishing other bridges.
but you're demolishing other bridges. So
Probably more fundamental.
I don't mean to be so critical, but I'm a logical person. That's why I'm in strategy. You do not sell something as a solution that is in itself creating another problem. Raila has talked about sweeping, BBI will sweep rubbish into the Indian Ocean. And the rubbish, therefore, would be the wing.
William Ruto and everybody else was there. Anybody other than him and Uhuru's side.
Not to mention the cost, sir.
Yes.
Not to mention the cost
Yes,
and the lack of underlying legal framework.
Yes.
So I'm not here. The president is my friend. I do not mean to unduly criticize him. I know he's under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. You can see how things are going and the whole talk about revolution and what have you. But I'm also not here to be a sycophant. So I will always tell him what the truth is, whether he likes it, whether he doesn't.
Coming back to the overshadowing, you mentioned something that has been on my mind for quite a long time.
Yes, sir.
I one time said that Raila has never internalized the concept that he will be the president of this country one day, regardless of how popular the votes are. That more than anything else, what he wanted mostly is, one, to wield a certain amount of power and to be a very loyal number two to somebody. You remember he said Kibaki Tosha,
Yeah.
expecting him to be appointed as the chief minister
Yeah.
under those kind of arrangements.
Yeah.
But of course, within days
Yeah.
of Kibaki coming to power,
Yeah.
he was thrown out of the center.
Correct.
I had a problem myself because he won even with the bigger numbers
Yes.
against Kibaki than against Uhuru on the two subsequent elections we've had now.
Correct.
And here was somebody who was supposed to be the president of Kenya, the president Kenya never had.
Yes.
But when the National Accord itself was reached at, which
Yes.
I opposed, I was the only person who stood against it, and
Okay.
him and William Ruto had to bend backwards over
Yeah.
to stop me from opposing that on the floor of the House.
Right.
Because I said I don't see a coalition government
Right.
as a solution to the problem this country has.
Right.
My idea was that we can have a coalition government only for 1 year for purposes of
Transitional.
preparing the country for another election,
Correct.
another general election.
Correct.
And this general election, there will be no rigging.
Correct.
But when then he was the prime minister, technically he was sharing power on a 50-50 basis with,
In
Kibaki.
theory, with the president, yes.
practically.
Yes.
That was the understanding with the international community also.
I remember he had 20 ministers.
That was the understanding.
Yes, sir.
And the understanding was that the two of them, nothing, no executive authority was going to be exercised without the two of them appending their signatures to it, including
Correct.
employment and everybody.
Correct.
But instead of basically having an eyeball to eyeball kind of arrangement
Relationship,
with Kibaki,
Yeah.
Raila was more interested in being seen as the second in command to Kibaki, the man welcoming Kibaki to Parliament when Parliament was going to have the state opening.
Correct.
The man who basically is supposed to be there as the number two to Kibaki,
Which then put him in conflict with the vice president.
which then put him into conflict with the vice president.
That's the vice president's role.
And I had, as a speaker, as a deputy speaker that time, and one time having had the pleasure of welcoming the president,
Yes.
I had something that really disgusted me.
Yeah.
Because here was Raila
Yeah.
and Kalonzo jostling on who stands on the right side of Kibaki.
Yeah. That was sad.
You see, one side
remember that.
definitely had to be the speaker because it's
Yeah.
is a parliamentary function.
Yeah.
So here are the two of them running one, to be on the right side.
Yeah.
And I called Raila aside and I told him, listen, isn't this the man who stole your votes?
Yeah.
Why do you have to shadow him? Why do you have to be a bodyguard? Why do you have to really love to be appreciated by him now as his number two? You're sharing power. You should not even come to Parliament on such days.
Yeah, you're right. He doesn't get that.
Now that he has won, as you put it,
Yeah.
we're seeing exactly the same kind of a behavior when he calls Uhuru brother.
Now with Kibaki's son,
Yes, with Kibaki's son,
Yeah.
much younger than him.
much younger than him.
Did Kenyans fail to notice that we were actually not supporting a leader all this time? He was supporting somebody who was looking to be number two, but unfortunately for him, the Mount Kenya group would never allow him to be that.
Yours is such a philosophical question, Mheshimiwa. It's such a deep and philosophical question, and often in the work I do around civic education with my organization, I often identify, as I do advocacy, as I do many interviews, as I do speaking engagements, I often identify the problem in this country with governance, not just a problem of the ruling elite, but also of the electorate, because we don't sufficiently interrogate anything. Honorable Raila is a friend of mine. I consider him a friend and I respect him a lot. But it is also on me, Mr. Speaker, and the reason I'm sitting here, it is on me also to not just be a follower, but to do sufficient background research and to do some reading. And if you understand the issues from the standpoint of Raila being an ex-detainee, you get to learn that there are certain weaknesses that are inherent, even psychologically, to people who have been detained and denied their freedoms and what have you for a long time. And many times a liberator might not necessarily translate into a quality executive. If you look at 2007, all indications are that Raila won. But here he is now. And one of the best examples that I like to give from 2007, just imagine, Honorable Farah, that in 2007, the president of Kenya had 46 members of parliament. Raila Odinga had 101.
Yeah.
That just gives you the magnitude of the problem.
Yeah.
And here is a man now reduced to kowtowing to the president.
Absolutely.
You remember the retreat.
The National Accord is 100% power sharing, 50-50.
I think
he did not have to kowtow.
you remember the retreat. Was it in Sagana?
Sagana. It was not a retreat. It was not a retreat. The president went to Sagana and invited him to join him in Sagana.
And then he just wasn't interested in even sitting down and listening to him
With
at all.
his with his, if he did not even pick his own Pentagon those days.
Exactly.
He just picked the permanent secretary in his office there,
Exactly.
basically
Issa Hakia.
to carry what do you call
Carry
the papers
notes,
for him,
yeah, exactly.
and the notes for him,
Exactly.
and just took off and straight away went to Sagana. And by the time he came back to us, he said, "Hata mkia
Yeah.
ni nyama." The idea
Exactly.
was that I got a long call from Kofi Annan,
Yeah.
45 minutes call from Kofi Annan,
Correct.
and he told me if Raila, all that Raila was interested in
Was just something small for himself.
was just something small, then why did we have to go through all those problems?
And that's what I'm saying.
The outriders and the name and the red carpet and that's about all.
And that's what I'm saying, sir, because I don't seem like I'm here to bash anybody.
Yes.
That Raila is a poor manager is a fact. That his party is disorganized is a fact. And the fruits of that, and I'm speaking now as a strategist, the fruits of that therefore has to be that you must now play second fiddle and be subservient to your political juniors,
Yeah.
and let your fate be determined by other forces outside of your own control. In other words, your destiny now is not really in your own hands. And I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, because the end game in this BBI, I don't think any Kenyan will be shocked if Raila is, quote, shortchanged. I don't think anybody will be shocked.
No. It's basically, it's a question. No, so changing is a bit relative. Because how much is he asking for? He's probably asking for so little that you don't have to shortchange him. You know, at the time when we were having the coalition government, President George Bush, went on prime time television in the States
Yes.
from the Oval Office
Yes.
and said, power sharing in Kenya has got to be real power sharing.
Exactly.
And
I remember
exactly
that.
what Kofi had in mind, which he intimated to me,
Yes.
was that Kibaki as a president will have the first choice at the cabinet. He will choose the cabinet ministry. Raila will choose another one.
Correct.
Kibaki another one.
Correct.
Raila another one. Kibaki another one.
It didn't happen that way.
And then they'll go to the permanent secretaries
Yes.
and do exactly the same.
Yes.
So it was going to be real power sharing. But whatever happened, whatever exchange in hands in Sagana, Raila came back and said, "Hata mkia ni nyama." He just basically took all the leftovers.
And what is worse is that, what once he became,
So whatever he traded with that, what do you call, powerful, and that's the time when the international community completely lost faith in us and wasn't willing to spend any more time.
because the unspoken issue here is money. But
Yes.
we'll come to that.
Yes. Anyway.
The unspoken issue here is big money. But the other point I was going to make, Mr. Speaker, is even with that mantle of the prime ministership, Honorable Raila did not distinguish himself as a leader of another wing of government.
No.
He did not distinguish himself. We still had corruption.
Yeah.
We had allegations of kazi kwa vijana.
Yeah.
We had the protocol wars with the vice president, etc.
Yes,
so that he did not rise above
Yes.
and meet expectation.
Yes.
In which case, then people will say, then what is the point of fighting for this thing if you are also inept, if you are also corrupt, you are accusing the other side of corruption? And I think once this credibility is so dented, it then gives the impetus
Yeah.
on your political juniors, your successors, the William Rutos of this world, etc., to not only have contempt for you, but also to have the audacity to, quote, rig you out. This is what happened.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to go beyond that.
No. I think because of the experience we had in 2007
Yes, sir.
and the subsequent whatever happened. To 2013, when this happened, the international community, particularly the eminent African personalities,
Yes.
we did not have any more interest. They said, look, even if we come and ask for justice, ask for fair democracy in that place, ask for all his rights, you never know what he's going to negotiate at the end of the day himself.
Exactly, yeah.
He might settle for something,
Exactly.
whatever, the way he did in 2008.
Yeah, so then it's futile.
So it's like,
Yeah,
why waste
not
our
worth
time
it, yeah.
with, let the Kenyans sort out themselves.
Okay.
And now, what happens in this case, he is definitely going to be shortchanged. There's no doubt about that.
I can't say with certainty, but
because even the idea of saying that this thing is going to be taken to the public
Yeah.
is an afterthought.
yeah,
And I don't think being the other principle, people say that this BBI document that was presented to us was a doctored document,
yeah,
fully doctored.
yeah,
Not so much because they did not want to prick the sensitivities of the former prime minister, but because of Ruto and what the mountain were looking at. You see, the war was more between Uhuru,
yeah.
his own backyard in Central
In
Province,
Central, yeah, there's a problem.
and Uhuru and Ruto,
Yeah.
who is basically flexing his. He was there he's now for about 8 years. This is the 8th year now we're running
Yes,
since they came to power.
or 7th.
7th year.
Yeah.
Basically, he has been running there as the number 2, the serious number 2,
Absolutely.
and more often seen as actually playing the role of the number 1.
And so it's got traction,
Unlike what Raila did under Kibaki.
of course.
You know what I mean?
Of
Deferring
course.
everything to Kibaki
Exactly.
and basically being just a very good follower.
Correct.
An errand boy, you could say to some extent.
Correct.
But this guy here, literally, he asserted himself.
Have you seen his entourage? I know for some of us in strategy.
I know. So it's not easy for Uhuru to just, shove him aside. It's impossible.
And he's an elected DP, not appointed.
Presidency.
Yes,
It basically
presidency.
they stay together.
Correct.
Until the end of the day.
Correct.
Now, that's the power politics.
Correct.
Those are the works of the deep state and basically, unfortunately,
Correct.
for our good friend who has suffered all these years, his own naivety or
Yeah,
his
yeah.
own weaknesses,
Yeah.
weaknesses for certain other, the niceties of the world,
Yes.
of life. What is in it for Kenya? Where are we? The economy, employment for young people, capital flight out of the country, industries closing,
I am sorry to tell you,
poverty in the country, literally abject poverty.
I am sorry to tell you, but I shouldn't be sorry to speak the truth. Mr. Speaker, where this country is now, and I look at data. I love looking at data because
Although a lot of it also has been fake data, because when they talk about 5.9% growth in the economy, I don't think we've had any.
I'm not even talking about that kind of data,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
I'm talking about, in a broader sense,
Yes.
to really understand the macroeconomics in this country. I work closely with the Institute for Economic Affairs, IEA.
I know.
I can tell you that unemployment numbers are staggering at over 50%. 1 in 2 Kenyans has no way of earning a living. The taxation regime in this country is out of control because we are punishing investors and business people by double and triple taxation and no commensurate services.
Yes.
Okay? So that's one of the things. If you look at remuneration, a person living in Kawangware in this country with a family earning $90 a month, you're paying rent, you're feeding your family, your kids are going to school. So the poverty numbers are unbelievable. If you look at the unemployment or even the banks, if you look at what it takes to open a business in this county or in this country, the licensing required, the corruption, the extortion, the security. I just saw a friend of mine over the weekend.
Pending bills, and the rest of it. Pending bills.
Pending bills.
Yes.
I noticed a friend of mine.
Hold on to your thoughts.
Yeah.
And briefly, we'll have a commercial break, and we
Yeah.
shall be right back. Viewers, we'll have a short commercial break, and shall be right back. For those who are joining us now, our guest tonight is Benjamin Dolo. Benji.
Yes, sir.
I had cut you short on the commercial break when you were talking about the state of the economy and the suffering of Kenyans.
I'm in a very unique advantaged position, Mr. Speaker, to understand what an economy is. Imagine Bill Clinton was my president as a young man in college in Chicago, and I really got to see in the more years what it is for an economy to be firing on all cylinders,
Yes.
where everything is literally working,
Yeah.
be it the restaurant business, be it the movie business, be it driving trucks or cabs, taxi, anything. I was recently in the UK and I was surprised. A taxi guy that dropped me to the airport at Heathrow explained to me, because my flight was quite early, he picked me up before 6 in the morning, and he explained to me that by 7 o'clock that morning, he would already have made the equivalent of 10,000 shillings. So he has a big mortgage on a big house, the bills are there, but there's opportunity to make money. And what we have here, Mheshimiwa, is a situation where poverty is ever a threat and ever grinding. And in this country, if you haven't been corrupt, chances are you don't have money or you're not wealthy. We have very few examples of industrialists, wealthy people that have made their wealth a clean way, and even when we do, they are also persecuted, such as you saw with the Keroche Breweries story. And so one of the knock-on effects I wanted to give you, sir, on the issue of pending bills, is you have all these counties, 47 of them as a matter of fact, that are delaying in paying salaries, that are delaying in receiving money from the treasury, that are then not able to pay genuine suppliers.
And
that
even when they have the money, they don't pay.
And even when they have the money, there's a frustration and the corruption and the extortion. And so my point is that in a country like that, where you have unemployment at that level, where you have an economy basically on its deathbed, how can a people have hope? How can you resuscitate the economy and rebuild? And that's why I was telling you that I'm sorry to tell you that what this country needs now is not more of the same, but a political revolution. Because revolutions, sometimes can also eat their own children.
Yeah.
You can go from the frying pan into the fire. And I'm seeing more and more talk about revolution. But what we need is now the rise of people like myself that have not really been in the politics and that are bringing new ideas and new energy, because as we were discussing the former Prime Minister
Are you looking
earlier,
at something like the Arab Spring, or you're looking at something like what's happening in Chile now?
the Arab Spring was a little too messy. We're looking at something, for example, even in the context of BBI, that says that our solutions are really right here with us. Our solutions are all on the table. And you know what we need to do, Mr. Speaker, is just implement this Constitution of
So
Kenya.
basically, you need a social and a political revolution.
Correct.
A bloodless social political
That will
revolution
bring
when you
in-
have the right.
that will
instead
bring
of,
in young
instead of
leaders.
having a deep state, basically, which
Exactly.
a few families and
Exactly.
a few folks and everything else.
Exactly. This is a sustainable solution.
Music chairs, basically.
And this is what you're hearing this King Kaka artist talking about. The fact that our political process is so murky, is so cynical. People think that you can only judge the character of a leader by his tribe, by
his pockets, the depth of the pockets.
Exactly, by money,
Yes.
no matter how that
Yes,
money is
yes,
made.
yes.
That there's also contempt for office.
Yes.
If you look at the behavior of people like Sonko,
Yes.
Joho in Mombasa,
Yes.
somebody goes in there and spends all his time on Instagram, bragging and showcasing the clothes that they're wearing, etc.
The houses they live in.
The house they live in, and yet,
and
the
the parties they throw.
The person next to you in that house has not had a meal. This is extremely, and I believe you're a devout Muslim. This is actually haram.
Try very hard.
This is actually haram. Let's begin there.
Of course.
And so you cannot then have any sort of
the corruption of all institutions, including institutions of education, where you went back to school yourself and you got your degree.
Absolutely.
I mean, you had such a powerful profile in the country as a young man, and nobody actually doubted that you did not have a degree. But you said, I don't have a degree, I have to go and get my degrees.
And
but look at all these people who are governors now, some of them.
Exactly.
Look
at Wajir.
Well, I wouldn't mention names, but look at them all. They're not many.
I'll mention on the speaker's gallery because that's my brand of politics, is to speak truth to power in such a candid manner that it leaves no doubt where the issue is. And Mr. Speaker, my concern,
and I'm told about not less than 10, 12 of them who don't have anything.
And so you can imagine the bribery going on. For them to get cleared, for them to dodge the bullet.
The courts all the way to Supreme Court are corrupt.
I've talked about this severally. I actually personally now have a case that I am prosecuting on a transaction I did with a friend. And in the courts, you can just see lack of jurisprudence.
Yes.
The judges are not writing any judgments.
Yeah.
They're not thinking through anything.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's unacceptable. And you're going to be hearing more from me on this
I saw
because
it.
I'm thinking
I was there.
If
I was
this
there.
if this happens
I was there.
in these courts
Yes.
to someone like me,
Yes.
who has a voice and who is known, I walk in the
Yes.
courts and
Yes.
the security guys there, the different magistrates, they know me by name.
Yes.
What about someone who is voiceless,
Yes.
coming from the county of Uasin-Gishu on a land matter? You know, they're old, they're frustrated, and they cannot get justice in these
I
courts.
I won't mention, but
It's
there's a
unbelievable.
judge who was supposed to be one of the, a female judge, one was supposed to be one of the most decent in the court, in the High Court.
I know who you're talking about.
But I'm told that she was taking 60 million shillings and told her, and she said, fine. If they want to sack me tomorrow, they might as well sack me because I'm not going to make this kind of money, even if I stay until I'm 70 years old and go and retire.
Which is why I talk about
Absolutely.
the problem in this country, Mr. Speaker.
She, it was a petition. She ruled in favor of the worst ruling you can ever see.
That is terrible. Let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, I had a meeting with the magistrates, the registrar of the magistrates in the judiciary just last week, Honorable Mulu, and you know what we agreed? It's unacceptable. Why? When people have a dispute in a decent society, there's only one place you can go to resolve a dispute.
Yes.
That place is the court.
And the courts are...
And if you cannot go to the court, then what you're saying is you're telling someone that they can go and pick a gun and eliminate their adversary. It's unacceptable, but I'll tell you this. We have undermined the Constitution. The corruption has permeated everywhere. But the good news is that this does not mean that it cannot be stopped. No, it is just a question of seriousness at the top and the deployment of real troops in a real war rather than showbiz, you know, in the name of a war while it's really a struggle. But I must also, on the same note, underline the highlights of it. And one I'll tell you is this. The young DPP, Haji, he's a no-nonsense guy. So if he gets you with something, he will come for you. And that is a good thing given...
He has no skeletons in the cupboard.
First of all, he's an intelligence guy. He's an intelligence guy, so he...
At least for purposes of basically the way things are right now.
But if we just gauge him against his predecessor, Keriako Tobiko.
Oh no.
Okay?
No.
You can see that if you have an issue, DPP Nurdin will come to your doorstep at 5 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes that is a kind of discipline that we need. I also believe, and I'm not being biased here, I also believe that sometimes being a devout Muslim has a lot to do with it. You know why? Because you're not susceptible to bribery. You are only fearing Allah. Because if you look at... I'll give you an example. Last week he called a press conference and gave a strong warning to the Samburu governor not to joke around.
No. Nurdin is...
Nurdin is not going to joke around.
I have known Nurdin like my son right from when he was in primary school, right when he was from when he was
and he's not doing it for cameras.
When he was a kid, and you can rest assured that is one extremely decent
disciplined,
young man.
Exactly.
Disciplined, decent again.
Exactly.
And he'll do his job right.
So you can imagine if we had about 5 or 6.
Unless, of course, he does not get the kind of the goodwill. It's always
at the top.
At the top.
That is always necessary.
If he has the goodwill at the top,
exactly.
he will do a good job. There's
exactly.
no doubt about it, yes.
And so then we can talk about a war on corruption. Otherwise, it's musical chairs. You have such unfortunate incidences as, you know, I heard in this song, Anway Guru, now giving commentary on how the country should be run. And what, you know, this is ludicrous. This is ludicrous, particularly because a lot of that corruption is not just, part of what I do, Mheshimiwa, is I try to humanize the narrative. So this is not 749 million, you know, and then we called the DCI when there was another 800 million. You have to break this down, Speaker, to where it means something on the ground. This money is meant for disempowered youths, disenfranchised youths. How dare you take this money and build houses with it and then turn around and lecture the country from a podium? Can't happen. So this is nothing against women or nothing against...
How much? I think the latest figure in terms of the amount of money in trillions that is being stolen from the national coffers in one way or
I
the
saw
other.
something like 8 trillion.
Was like between 6 and 8 trillion.
Yeah, something like that. That's unthinkable. I
That-
mean, that's not a
in a
country.
year.
That's not a country.
That's our total debt.
That's not a country.
So if you can save that,
Exactly.
You
And,
can
and,
pay-
and, and you can only save that by getting the right kind of leadership, by not having money and greed define power and politics. And it's possible. I know it sounds crazy, but I preach this gospel everywhere I go, Mr. Speaker. It is possible.
5 months down the line,
Yes, sir.
6 months, mid next year, where do you think we shall be with BBI and the future of this country? This is a transitional administration, by the way. Uhuru is coming to the end of his term
Yeah.
as a president. Rumor has it he wants to change the system of governance
Yeah.
and have a parliamentary system, and he can come back as a prime minister. He has refuted that, I'm told, very openly and very vehemently. But I saw a friend the other day who is very, very close to him, to the powers. And he said if he's pushed too hard, Uhuru is the type you cannot push around too much. If you push him too hard, then he says so be it, and might come back and throw the gauntlet and change the system and have a referendum, parliamentary system, and run for the prime minister.
I think what he told you is true.
Yes, and then of course, where do you think we will be if that eventually happens?
So I was very fortunate to see the president a couple of weeks ago. He's my alma mater, high school.
Yeah.
I always...
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's.
Yes.
I'm in the alumni committee, so
Yes.
whether he likes it or not, there's some activities.
He has
we're
to run
doing
into
now.
you.
He has to run into me.
Yes.
I like him as a person for many reasons. He's a loyal guy. He's a decent guy.
Yeah, but kind, he strikes as somebody who's basically kind. He's
Yeah.
not
President Uhuru is kind-hearted, and
Yeah.
in a country like Kenya, that is not common. Remember, he's the son of a president. Many people in his shoes would not talk to any ordinary Kenyan. Many people in his shoes,
pretty much down to earth in certain.
in that regard, yes. I also talk to his people. I take no joy in the perception that his government is incompetent. I really want to help for the sake of the country, for the sake
Of all days, and because you went to same school anyway.
I mean, you can imagine, Speaker, if, for example, now, for me also as a Saints guy, people feeling like I would be incompetent as a governor or as a senator simply because I went to... Because there's that sentiment as well. So it really, 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 really hurts me. I'll tell you this.
Which was a rich boys kind of an institution.
in those days, yes.
Those ones were in the system, and who could afford.
Exactly. I'll tell you this, sir.
Many of us could not afford. We had to go to national schools.
But look at you today.
Because of our own grades in CP, that's the only way we were able to.
It's one of those things that they call from nothing to everything.
Yeah,
I mean, that is really the story of triumph. President Uhuru, if I could just, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, he could care less if he was in that office tomorrow. He doesn't really want.
He doesn't enjoy the experience.
No. I mean, there's a bit of enjoyment, etc. But, you know, when you look at power and the quest for it, it was really more about...
That's what I believed myself for many years, but
No,
I'm not sure if I still believe the
I
same.
actually know that.
Yes.
I actually know that.
Yes.
Now, what is there is there's a cabal
Around him.
around him
Yeah.
or about him that uses his position for their own benefit.
Yeah.
And that cabal, and I believe that Mheshimiwa Raila is part of that
Now.
group now. Absolutely. Is the cabal that is trying to craftily change something to use him again, because, you know, he doesn't really need to be in any position. He doesn't need to come back in any way, even after becoming president. He was not really dying to become president in the first place.
No.
Or even minister. It's really unfortunate what these people are doing, but as your friend told you, I think if he's pushed hard enough, then he would just kind of give in and agree to that. And the reason they're doing that is so that he's used as a shield to sneak someone else into some position. It's really unfortunate because then you can see the whole talk about dynasties and the whole dynasty debate taking traction.
Where does that put me? And you, and, you know, because whenever Raila talks, for a very long time, Raila has been trying very hard to reach out to Uhuru, to create that
Rapport.
unique class,
Yeah.
unique, very, very exclusive membership class
Yeah.
of the children of a former president and a former
Yeah.
vice president.
Vice president, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And whenever he talks, he always used these terms and terminologies.
Yeah.
The founding fathers of the Republic of Kenya.
Correct, yeah.
And more or less confining that to his father and the two fathers, the former president and the former
Yeah.
vice president.
Yeah. I think it's quite fallacious.
Which is extremely fallacious. Yes,
It's
I
quite
get- I get
fallacious.
you, yes. Because there were those people who spilled their bloods on this and who never had the opportunity to even be recognized like Dedan Kimathi and the rest of them.
Exactly. But even for the simple fact, sir, that
Yes,
the president
Yes.
jailed Jaramogi,
yes,
you know, put him in detention.
yes,
You know, the connotation of founding fathers
Yes.
is so glorious.
yes, yes.
You know, these are
it's borrowing
champions.
basically from the American.
From the- yeah.
The difference in you see, this is
The difference is night and day.
these are the fundamental problems of the lack of certain intellectual depth.
If you read American history, George Washington was a spectacularly talented individual that held these caucuses. They were called, at the time, they were called small courts over the weekends. And they were just caucus in Washington. They were under the United Kingdom then. And he was such a spectacular leader that the people kept pushing him to actualize the organization and then the struggle for independence. This was in the mid-1700s. And ultimately, a resistance against the British that shocked the British to the core. This is not some joker around town. George Washington and Ulysses Grant and all of these guys were really not people with skeletons in their closet, so to speak. One example I like to give, Mr. Speaker, because Kenyans really need a lot of this intellectual drilling. Do you know that when the US Constitution was written, in the room where the founding fathers confined themselves for some weeks away from society to dream of a nation and to write how that nation should look 250 years down the road, the room was dirty. It was not a nice hotel. It was not a retreat.
In Philadelphia, yes, I know.
In Philadelphia, this was like such
Now, those are the founding fathers.
a sacrifice.
The intellectual inputs into that.
Exactly.
The Adams and Jefferson. And,
Exactly.
These were Madison. and the rest
Exactly,
of
yeah,
them.
exactly.
These are the guys who put that intellectual, you see, the Federalists and the other ones.
Correct.
And all that. And these were 13 states.
Exactly.
So the founding fathers are in the sense of that intellectual inputs that culminated.
Exactly.
Finally.
Yes.
In the Constitution, which is the American Constitution right now between 1776 and 1786.
Correct. And the expansionism.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and of
And,
course,
and the purchase of New Mexico.
they purchased everything.
You know, New Mexico up
New
until
Mexico,
Hawaii.
the conquest of Texas.
Exactly.
You know, Texas was conquered.
Exactly.
I mean, this is a process. It's a very lengthy process, and it took a long time. But when I'm just coming to the founding fathers. The founding fathers were those delegates from the first 13 independent states that formulated the American Constitution that they have today.
So can you call these founding fathers?
No, you can't. You can't. I mean, you can say the first independent African president who fought for independence, and you say these were the original people who sacrificed everything for this country to be independent.
And differed with his VP in public and called him unprintable.
Yeah, that includes the first president, that includes the vice president, that includes all those guys, Tom Mboya,
Yeah.
Ichuru,
Yeah.
Masinde Muliro.
And political assassinations with it as well.
Yeah.
You cannot wish that away.
Yeah, so you see, founding, when you talk of founding, there is much more intellectual input into that. Because then your craft, this was a colony.
I believe that's why people like Miguna accuse him of conmanship.
Yes.
Because
yes,
there's a
yes.
level
I mean,
of manipulation.
It's not right. It's
And-
not right.
and-
Just
and-
trying
and
to borrow-
disinformation,
Just
yeah.
trying to borrow something
Exactly.
from another experience,
And cut
another
and paste, yeah,
jurisdiction, and then
exactly.
pretend that you
It's
can also
dishonest.
create that. Very dishonest.
Yes, sir.
Now, let me now ask you finally.
Yes, sir.
I always never forgiven myself for failing to see the wisdom when we got the Constitution promulgated in 2010 to say that this is the new Constitution. And there is Constitution and there is constitutionalism,
Correct.
living the spirit and the letter of the Constitution itself.
Mutunga, the CJ, talked about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is to give it to the architects of that.
Correct.
The people who basically were there when this big thing was being put together and promulgated. That was the president and the premier.
Yeah.
Maybe what you should have had is to give them one term together
To implement
in some kind of an arrangement for that implementation so that we don't have to complain today about lack of implementation of the Constitution.
Correct.
We're looking for a new ways to change the Constitution when we have not even
Implement-
operationalized fully the first one.
Yeah. It's a misnomer.
Now, to leave now the operationalization of that Constitution to two people, who one of them was watermelon and the other was openly opposed. The President, Uhuru,
I
was
know.
a watermelon in this case.
I know.
And his deputy was
a no.
outrightly, openly opposed to it.
It explains a lot.
It explains a lot.
It explains a lot.
Now, in the event that we have to get a new dispensation through this referendum right now and get a constitution that's going to be parliamentary system,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be prudent for us to say, look, the very people who are in office at the time when this new constitutional dispensation is, or rather this new additional amendments into the Constitution is, which are very fundamental. It literally rocks the whole roots of our own governance system here, from
Yeah.
presidential to
Yeah.
parliamentary.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be right for us to have somebody like Uhuru to be a prime minister for one term, for only purposes of making sure that this new animal, which can be a good animal or a bad animal, can be fully operationalized?
No, that would not be the way to go for many reasons. Number one, I do not believe in forcing leadership upon anybody. Leadership is a calling. Leadership, especially in third world countries, Mr. Speaker, is, and you know this better than me, there's too much need.
There has to be a certain fire in somebody's belly
Exactly.
to change society.
And you cannot get that fire in a university, you cannot get it in a seminar, you cannot get it from your friend.
Not experience, not the family you came from.
Exactly. And
Yes.
so this would be completely wrong-headed for that simple reason, which is a fact. And then secondly,
Then we need a revolutionary
absolutely,
from outside.
and a disciplined and a patriot. Somebody who
A
loves this country.
patriotic, very well disciplined
Absolutely.
revolutionary from outside who is going to
Absolutely.
implement this to the letter.
Absolutely. Maybe something like
To
what
the
we're
chagrin,
seeing.
to the chagrin of all the established so-called deep state itself, is going to dismantle the deep state.
Yeah, but you see, what the deep state is doing is not sustainable.
Yes.
You cannot ride roughshod over a people forever
Yeah.
and expect a successful, sustainable society. So, again, for the simple fact that leadership must never be forced on anyone, Uhuru should not be forced to come back in any capacity.
Well, basically, this is one line of argument that those people who want him to come back, for whatever reasons.
Yes, but you see, we also have to provide an
would-
alternative line of argument. Secondly, it is extremely terrible for respect of institutions and constitutional term limits. This is where Kibaki himself is a hero, very humble leader. Kibaki would not dream of coming back in any capacity whatsoever. That is very important. And thirdly, you do not rush to change a system when you have not implemented the system that you already have. So if you cannot respect this constitution, how will you respect the next constitution?
Yeah.
I just don't see the logic.
And you don't have that now.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The solution, Mr. Speaker, has got to be to look for the right leaders and to implement the constitution to the
And
letter.
society to have that change of heart,
And they can.
powerful change of heart.
And they absolutely can.
And basically to have a revolutionary,
Exactly. Mindset.
a peaceful,
Clean.
democratic,
Absolutely.
political, social revolution in
For the
country
benefit
in
of
which-
all.
For the benefit of all in the
Correct. Yeah.
country.
Are we done? Thank you very much. God bless you, sir. Merry Christmas.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
I hope
asante.
to have you on the
Asante.
same program and some other state. And I, by the way, for the benefits of the viewers, Benji will you'll see the face of Menji on this program more often than you've seen now,
I'll be happy to come.
with a number of playing a number of roles, and I will at the appropriate time tell you what that role that he will be playing in.
I'm also good in asking questions.
That's what I say. That's what I do.
I thank you so much, sir. I really look up to your leadership, and
Yes,
keep
thank
mentoring
you.
me, tafadhali.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Asante
you. You're
sana.
welcome. You're
And
most
Happy
welcome.
New Year to you.
Viewers, we have come to the end of the show, and until the next time, have a good night.